Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Sacred Self-Healing meeting here. Current energies for September 2017. I gotta come up with the weirdest years. I wanted to say 2012. Isn't that weird? Hello, everybody. Quick sound check here. Can you hear me? I did a sound check earlier. Yes. Can you hear me right now? Okay, I'm using a new microphone. I hope that this will be a bit nicer in the future. So anyway, this is an open mic meeting, so I'm going to unmute your microphones as I'm speaking, and then you can control your own microphone. There you go. All right, I hope you guys are all well. How has September been treating you so far? You know how it's been treating me. I've been doing these weekly videos. So if you've been following those, you can actually see just by looking at me how I'm feeling. But these meetings are mostly for sharing and for asking questions. I'll give a little bit of an overview, kind of like what, like in summary, like this whole month of September has really been about this tension between implementation, like going into the practical, and consequences. So a lot of September, and this is actually what we've been seeing from like really the end of the year, is that it's been sort of focusing, like honing in on September and October. So all the consequences of unresolved issues. So all the stuff that I've been talking about since the beginning of the year, really, resistances, the issues with stagnation, the issues with not wanting to see things, the issues with procrastinating. Those are all issues that are now sort of hitting us in the face. And of course, this is meant on all levels. So whatever we experience on our micro level really happens as well on the macro level. And like I mentioned in this last week's energy update, it's hard to say what was there first. You know, it is hard to say if it's the combination of all our energy that leads to like say earth changes or geopolitical issues or social issues, or if it's the outer energies that lead to our personal crisis. This is really hard to say. And if we have the time, I'd love to hear you guys' opinion about this, like which way round this goes. But from all I can see, it works in conjunction, in connection with another. It's not possible to separate the two. And so you can, of course, say, well, what does my personal karma, what does my personal fate has to do with the world, you know, with the president of a certain country or a volcano eruption at the other end of the planet. Of course, sometimes this is difficult to see, but when you really tune into your own energies and how they fluctuate with certain other developments in the world, then you'll find out that it's actually not that different. You may not experience an earthquake in your personal life, but you may experience energies that are very similar to that. And so it's more so looking at what are the energies underneath things. The way our personal reality, our physical reality then plays out has a lot to do with how we handle those energies. Which is why I try to make a point out of teaching or showing that the way we perceive our reality has to do with, or the way we experience our reality has to do with how we perceive it. So if I perceive the world as a hostile place, then of course in times where there's a lot of fear, anger, fear and anger energies going around, I will see this confirmed. If I see the world as a a place where there's a multitude of energies unfolding, and depending on what I hone into, what I focus into, this is how I perceive this. Then I become a lot more tolerating to all these things, because I realize, like, okay, this is like an offering. There's a crisis going on. Am I going to go jump into it or not? And so our reality then becomes different. And with increasing training of our energetic sensitivity, and also, of course, transcendence of some of our personal ego aspects, we begin to be able to detach a lot more from these collective waves. We'll still see them, we can still feel them, but we'll feel like we have a choice, whether we participate in this, or if we want to participate in this or not. And September, so far, it's only been 2 weeks and a little bit into it, but has already been a very good test for that. So I mentioned to a few of you before that if you can look at things more sort of like a test, not like as in a mastering, or you have to get through this like as a temptation, but more so as a test, like how centered is your energy. And if you get sucked into things, all right, then it's not a big deal, then you know what to do. You know how to recenter yourself, you know how to breathe into your heart and stay calm, and you just give it the time it needs to rebalance, and then you will realize that you can exit whatever the play, whatever the sort of the show is. Has any one of you ever experienced this kind of sort of switching the channel or exiting a reality? Has any one of you ever, like, or maybe even recently, experienced something like that, where you see something going on, you feel pulled in, you maybe get sucked in for a little bit, and then all of a sudden you get this prompting to just ease in, to center, and to pull yourself out?
I know I have. Hi, this is Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Hey. Hi, everyone. One of my favorite sayings that I read years ago is, you can have your mountain highs and valley lows. And that's exactly what I've been experiencing the past 2-3 weeks. But the difference is, because of doing the Sacred Self-Healing course, and what you and Jeff have taught us, it's not like extreme emotions anymore. The buttons may still be pushed, and it may go in a temporary, panic mode or self-doubt mode or something, just temporary. But the difference is, I am able to remind myself that it's all about staying still, observing, and breathing, and staying grounded. Stand your ground, so to speak. And so it hasn't been, though I've experienced these mountain highs and valley lows, they haven't emotionally been as traumatic as they have been in previous years by any means, because now I have that window or doorway that I see to make choices about how I want to perceive things and how I want to react to things like that. And if I do react a certain way, it's as you said earlier, then if it's not pleasing to me, then I need to look within to see what's going on, what would cause that reaction.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, you've been around for a while. You've done the Heart Warrior program. You're in a transCODES training. So you have sort of the maximum of training with this, like pretty much every day. I mean, every other day at least, right? That we work together, or that we have some kind of exchange.
Yes.
Have you noticed, like, I mean, I mentioned this before, that there's a little bit of a danger with us to dissociate rather than to detach. So we all can dissociate from things, like just sort of like cut ourselves off. But I'm not really talking about that when I say, and not really getting sucked into things. Have you noticed that you begin to see sort of the larger picture in it all, like sort of the interaction? That to me
Oh,
was
definitely. Yeah,
yeah.
I was going to make a comment that at work, as I mentioned before, I work with a company of over 80 people, and so I interact with a number of people throughout the day. And what at times when I about ready to pass judgment on myself or beat myself up because I caught myself getting sucked into something, I'm able to objectify whatever's going on, and out of that, I notice the other coworkers or clients we have, and I notice they're going through the same thing in a way, and yet I can never talk to them about energy work or consciousness or shadow work or anything like that. But I do notice a parallel, and so then I really, when I have time, I try to go deeper within, and that's when I'm able to sort out what's my stuff and then what's collective stuff that's going around.
Thank you for saying that, because that's really the key aspect here, regardless of whether it's a personal crisis or an outer crisis. I mean, we can get sucked into inner crisis just as easily as to outer crisis. And an inner crisis, of course, is an impulse, it's a trigger, it's something that is, I mean, as a simple example here, for instance, watching a movie. Watching a movie and there's something sad that happens, and you can go in there, and just so you know, I am a terrible movie watcher. I cry in every movie, I get sucked in, I go in there, but I know that I am going in there, and this makes the big difference here. I understand the bigger scheme. I understand that there is a sort of a storyline that is developing, and I get sucked in, and then I slowly let go. So I allow this to go through me, but I slowly let go. I'm not going into like a whole sort of storyline within myself then, for the rest of the day or a couple of days even. I just accept that, okay, this type of story, this type of energy that is coming in makes me feel this way and that way. Okay, I allow that to happen. I allow myself to go there, and then I breathe it out. I let it go. And that's kind of like what I heard you say too, Brian, is that, it's like seeing what is going on, and there's a choice part with that, which is, am I gonna like bite on it and really sort of get the juice out of the whole thing, or am I just gonna let it be? Don't beat myself up either, because that would be, sort of the same in a different color. If I fight against something, resist something, or try to make it go away, or judge myself for things, then I'm energizing it as well. So we got to be careful there. That some of us have that attitude that we want to make things go away. We want things. We want our ego. We want to get rid of our ego. All right, these things or these notions are still sort of part of our ego, really, because when we are in that sort of centered place that we all want to be in, then we don't really need to be worried about that. We don't really need to worry that we're feeling the effects of weather, say. We can't beat ourselves up for feeling cold because it's getting cold outside. If you do that, then you're resisting the cold, and then you're making it worse. What you want to do instead is accept that this is something that is being triggered in you. Okay, you feel it out. What is it exactly that is being triggered in you? Okay, I'm getting cold right now. It's starting to become winter here. There's a part of me that resists winter. So I have to work on that one as well, because that comes up with it. And then, I just go get some warmer clothes. I deal with the situation as it sort of unfolds in front of me or inside of me. So in order to actually know how to respond I need to let this go through me. And when I'm centered, or when I have this, like what you called earlier, Brian, the ability to stand your ground, um, that doesn't mean that I have to fight everything. It just means that I can sort of be calm. I can be relaxed. I can say, all right, let me feel this out a bit. Let me sit in here for a moment. Oh yeah, that's making me really, really cold. I may want to get, a coat. All right, instead of feeling victimized by the fact that summer is over. I don't know if that makes sense as an example, but that's
I find that I've come to learn that if you don't like something that's going on, and you're just trying to ignore it, disassociate yourself, and hope it goes away, and maybe it does, but then it always presents itself twice fold, smacks you up the side of the head to where it starts to become painful in a way. I mean,
yeah.
you really have to be responsible and accountable for what's going on, and that's the hard thing, is being at least that is for me. It was being accountable, for whatever I was experiencing. But that overlapped into choices, how you choose to experience it. So.
Yeah, and there's a thing there with most of us that we feel like just by hearing the word consequences, we kind of cringe, because we think or we have this notion in our heads that consequences are something negative. When if we can see consequences just sort of as a logical sort of result of, like you said, Brian, the choices that we've done, that we've made in the past. Then being accountable is not about having to be afraid of being punished or of being judged. Judging is a big aspect for most of us, the fear of being judged or judging ourselves, but just as a logical sort of a flow of things. So if I spend a lot of time energizing fear, in like say in over the time span of a week, well, yeah, then my whole system is going to vibrate on that resonance, and I will kind of attract this kind of frequency into my life. I will attract other people in my life that are fearful also, and everybody will be talking about, how we're going to all get hit by a meteor or whatever. It doesn't matter. Fear, the resonance will bring out, a variety of what people sort of have in their minds as fear. There's people for whom the biggest fear is not to be loved. There's people whom the biggest fear is not to survive or to have physical issues. There's people who their biggest fear is to lose money. All right, but it all comes down to the same core, and the core is this part in us, what we call ego, that is supposed to secure sort of our feeling of, or our sense of self, our sense of safety, our sense of ownership, our sense of belonging. And the biggest trigger for our fear is when either one of these aspects of our self feels threatened. Then we all go sort of in whatever it is that, like represents our biggest fear. And the fear of consequences, the fear of sort of punishment, so to speak, is karmically implemented in most of us. There's very few people that I have met over the years who have either worked through this entirely or never had this in the first place, and that is sort of the fear of consequence. And the fear of consequence is what creates this subconscious fear of taking responsibility. So what Brian, what you just mentioned, the accountability for our energy and for our choices is very often blocked by fear. And of course, this has a lot to do with our childhood experiences, etc. You know, how we were treated, or what we've experienced when we did something, you know, and when we sort of had a sort of own up to things. And here's the connection between being able to stand your ground and own up, own your own part, being accountable for your energy. When there is an attachment there, an ego attachment there, in regards to fear, then it's very difficult for us to stand our ground. Because when we stand our ground, we also have to be accountable. We have to inhabit ourself. We have to inhabit. We have to own all our parts. And that's kind of like, that's the part here that is really being brought into the foreground here this whole month. And this will continue, by the way, till the end of October. Just it goes through several layers. Right now, like the first 10 days here in September, it has been going through the layer of you know, like actually being able to bring things into 3D. There's a lot of 3D stuff that we have been dealing with in these first 10 days. Practical stuff, you know, very, very practical, like earthy kind of earthy stuff. And for a lot of spiritual people, this has caused a little bit of an issue, because here, yes, survival, Julianne, yes. By the way, you can comment here at any time. All right, so I see your texts here. These practical things can cause issues for people who have been spending a lot of time with spiritual thinking or spiritual concepts, because for some of us, the spiritual provides a little bit of an escape route sometimes. All right, it's one thing to say, you know, I'm responsible for who I am. I own my part in my reality. I own, you know, I'm accountable for all my choices. And it's another thing to say, oh, well, it's all karma, it's all fate, you know, God's gonna work this out for us, and so forth. I don't know if you can feel this right now, but I want to get at this point of externalizing our powers. A lot of us have been raised with the idea that it's not even a conscious idea, but with this mental construct, that if we believe in a higher power, that higher power is responsible for everything that happens in our life. And there is a conflict there in us. So it's this philosophical dilemma between understanding that higher power is within us, but at the same time also our ego, right? And so which part now, which part of us is responsible? I can tell you one thing. When something good happens in your life, your ego will want to take the credits immediately. It won't have a problem with that at all. So then there's a split in many of us how we actually judge, how we perceive our reality. And that is when something seemingly good happens to us, the ego sort of feels safe, it feels content, and it sort of responds with you know, with the accountability, all right, you know, and when you win in the lottery, you know, I mean, that's not hard, you know, except for you can't really take any credits for winning the lottery, maybe for buying a ticket, but that's about it. But when something bad happens, then we tend to externalize that, and that's where most people get sucked into panic, get sucked into chaos, into fear. And that is that they think that they cannot control the negativity, the darkness around them. So this is really what we've been going through here the first 10 days is being hit with just some manifestations in the practical that triggered our survival, that triggered this sort of core dilemma for our ego, not wanting to take responsibility for or not wanting to be accountable for our choices, ending up sort of getting sucked into the drama that was created or the chaotic energies that were generated through the collective, and now finding ourselves in this pit of helplessness or hopelessness. So whenever we feel helpless or hopeless, yes, and some people here commenting that this is so funny. I'd love to hear, Justine, how you think this is funny, because it is, but I don't want to be the only one laughing.
Well,
speak up.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, because I'm hearing something else at the same time. Just meant, oh, there we go. I had some sort of brainwave things going on. All right, sorry about that. It was just a background thing to help balance the brainwaves. It was also going on at the same time. So that's what I mean. It's too funny. Like, as you're talking, what I do when things get busy and stressed, or just any time, is try to do things where I focus on my hand. So gardening or cooking, and I find it very grounding. And it's a type of meditation for me of sorts, but it's practical at the same time. So as you were talking, I'm only giggling because it's funny, because just the way things turn out, you just can't, so much is just out of our control. And just like the serenity prayers, there is lots within our control. And basically breathing is about the best thing until you die. But I'm actually filling out a crossword contest thing as a way to just focus, and whether I win or not is not an issue. It's just, find the letter, and I do that as a. So I'm laughing because you're talking about contests and winning, and here I am scratching this ticket. So that's it. It's nothing. It's just that.
Okay.
But that's also relates to what you're talking about in that. In regards to how things, consequences, and what we do, and what can result and what can't result, and to detach from so much. Like, it's, my teaching this week was so much based on, I don't have to figure everything out.
Mm-hmm.
And just being aware is good enough. And why something happens and understanding it is not necessary, because there's too much to understand. Our brain, it's beyond comprehension because of the complexity of, not even complexity, because it's beyond just me, little old grain of sand me. But I can be aware, and so there's humor too in the awareness, and that's all I'm saying. It's what you're sharing is really helpful.
Humor actually came in as a very beautiful healing resonance, especially last week. That's why I was trying to make an example that's a bit more sort of down to earth. With the lottery ticket, for instance, and how our ego tries to take credits for everything good that happens in our life, and how we immediately distance from something bad that happens, as something, somebody else's fault or something like that. So the whole point here for September energies is that we kind of get into this place of closure with things. And one thing you said, Justine, is really important, and that is that trying to have a fix for everything. Okay, so this plays directly into the ego's attachment of wanting to be or needing to be in control. All right, there are things that are happening right now on a larger scale that regardless of whether or not we understand them, because that's just a mental way of sort of trying to get the upper hand, doesn't really matter. There's nothing we can do about them anyway. I mean, can we do anything about missiles being shot at Japan? No. You know, can we do anything about a dam breaking in California? No. Can we do anything about earthquakes or hurricanes? No. There's nothing we can do about these things. It doesn't even matter if we understand how hurricanes form, or, you know, perhaps even if there's weather manipulation going on or something. It doesn't even matter. That's what I meant with these conspiracy theories. If we go into all these theories of why and what caused what, we are energizing our ego, because our ego likes the idea of causality. It likes this Newtonian way of seeing things, that, you know, you do one thing here and then that causes that and that causes that. But if we were really true to that, then we would actually see that all our experiences, the reality that we are in, is indeed a sort of consequence of all choices that we have made, of all thoughts, all deeds, all sentiments, all energies that we have inhabited, that we have ingested in our past. But see, this is not something our ego likes to admit. This is where causality, so to speak, ends for our ego, because our ego just looks at the immediacy of things. It looks at, like, this is being caused by that, this is somebody else's fault, and there's nothing, you know, that affects me. It's not my fault, or it is all my fault. That's the other side of the coin. Same ego attachment. It's all my fault. Yeah. The truth of the matter is that we live in a non-causal and non-linear universe. This is not even a spiritual insight. This is something that we've known for over 100 years, which means that it really isn't the way it displays itself. Of course, if some kind of president somewhere on the earth decides to go nuts and starts a war, you know, there is a direct link there, but we don't know what caused that in that person. You know, we don't know the connection here between what our ego wants to make as causality and how it really works on an energetic level is too simplified for our ego. But our ego likes that idea. It always comes down to, you know, like our externalization. So when something bad happens, we externalize it, and that means that we honestly can't internalize any of the good things in our life. And so, in essence, what I'm saying is, the more we blame things on something, somebody, even God or karma or whatever, the less our ability to actually internalize positive developments in our life. And so anxiety and fear have a lot to do with externalizing our powers on an energetic level. Because if we immediately blame, you know, seemingly negative things onto others, then that's sort of an MO, it's a mode of operation. It's like how our energy immediately dissociates from something. And if we have done this all our lives, it becomes very difficult for us to actually see positive developments, to see, for instance, on the larger scale here, talking collective energies, how some of these current developments, such as the very likely collapse of our financial system as it is right now, and the collapse of power structures as we have them right now, how this is actually something positive. If someone is constantly blaming their experiences, and with it sort of the way they will see the world, then they have to see themselves as subject to outer powers at all times. And this is then what sort of increases or what energizes this feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. So if we want to get out of our fear of the future, say, and we've had a few suggestions here from you guys already. Well, first of all, the first thing I said was to really just stay, don't dissociate right away. Stay, keep your eyes open, become the witnesser. Don't get hooked on the experiencer part. I mean, the experiencer part will always be there. It's directly linked to your autonomous nervous system. It's directly linked into the neurology of you. Okay, so you'll have neurotransmitters and hormones reacting in you when you see something. You can't really detach from that one. It will always be there. All right, but you can choose to allow this to go through you, and even if it's a painful sensation, to let this go through you and feel it. If you immediately dissociate or want to get rid of or want to cut it out or judge yourself or others, blame others for what you're experiencing, then you can never own your successes. You can never own your own karma. Karma not being as anything negative, karma as being sort of the propensities in your life. And most of all, you cannot really excel. You cannot really grow into your highest potential because you're unable to see, unable to discern what is conducive and what is sort of forward or propelling for you. This is here the bigger lesson of this month is to own your part in how you experience your reality and to not shy away from staying in it, just not getting sucked into it. And to translate these things into the physical, into the 3D. So when I talk about physical reality, I mean 3D. I mean like what we are experiencing sort of on a human, a physical, solid level. All right, this could be our health. This could be our relationship. This could mean anything in your practical life. Condition of your house, the condition of your car, the things that are going on with your finances, the things that are going on with your relationships. Those are all sort of things that we experience in our physical reality. But then we also have an emotional reality where we experience those things with our emotions, and we have to process them on that level as well. And then we have, of course, the mental level, which is the level that tries to conceptualize things. Maybe I have the wrong job because I'm not making enough money. I can't pay my bills, so I may want to find a job that pays more money. That's a concept. The concept is logical. All right, that's the mental level, and then we have to process things in a spiritual way, which is what is the larger meaning here of this, and maybe looking at some of the contextualization that we're doing. How do we contextualize what is happening to us? And then those of you here in this sacred self-healing environment, you are already realizing or accepting that there's something like an energetic reality. And what is the energetic reality that we need to process? It's like, what's the pattern here? Maybe there's there maybe there's some recurring program going on here in my life. You know, whenever certain things happen, then my energy gets stuck in fear, or my energy goes into fighting, or my energy goes into trying to dominate, or trying to overpower things, and trying to take over control. So these are the different levels in which we are perceiving and processing our reality, and depending on sort of where we have the biggest blocks, that's usually where we get stuck in the most. So if you get stuck in fear and anxiety, for instance, then this is a sign that there is that there are emotional energies in you that have not been processed right, such as the fear of consequence, for instance, or the fear of being held responsible, the fear of judgment, the fear of making a mistake. That came in big time these last 2 weeks. This perfectionism. And then sort of, because something cannot be perfect, then you're sort of getting stuck in this nowhere land of not doing anything and externalizing our powers again. Then when you have a lot of unprocessed mental energies, and you have to get through chaotic or correctional energies, you'll get stuck in mental looping and what ifs. And you start, being unable to sleep. Your mind goes in overdrive, and you keep on thinking about, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? And you go into the nth iteration of a problem. And when you have things unresolved in your spiritual, you get this immediate sort of fear of wrath triggered in you when chaotic energies happen. Like, oh, God is punishing us for things, or for our past, or this is it. The world's going to go under, or depending on what sort of your spiritual beliefs are, it will go into some of the unprocessed parts of that. And on an energetic level, which is the one that penetrates them all, basically, that reaches into all of these different levels, you can, if you train your energy, you can catch that way ahead of time. And this was something that Brian mentioned earlier, is like when you know your energy well. Okay, so first, of course, you learn about your own energy, and you observe your own energy. You don't have to fix things. It's more about like becoming more aware and owning it. And as soon as you begin to own your own energy, you begin to see, well, first of all, you begin to be able to discern. You can feel when something is not yours. For instance, last week when there was a huge sort of wave of fear and pain coming through the etheric, then you would have recognized immediately that this is not your pain, this is not your fear, it's not mine. It triggers mine, but it's not mine. So it's not real. It only becomes real if I go there. So this is sort of the difference between the different levels of reality that we are experiencing. And depending on where we have unresolved aspects, that's usually where our perception of reality gets stuck. And speaking of perception of reality, has any one of you noticed that there's a typo in September? This was the moment, the first moment for me to recognize this. So I've misspelled September. If you look at it from a large perspective, actually it looks kind of okay. But if you look at the letters individually, you see that there's a typo there, and that's kind of like our energetic perception. If we we are really willing to go into owning our own energy, then we begin to see we begin to see the overlays. We begin to see all the different things that manipulate our energy. And when I say manipulate, it's not even sort of a direct, like a direct manipulation. It's more sort of how the whole system manipulates itself. And when I say system, I literally mean the system itself, not the powers that are messing with the system. That, of course, is another factor, but it is the system itself. So if the whole entire collective goes into fear and pain, depending on our attachment to our own aspects, our energy will get pulled in. And some people will get pulled in more than others. And I can predict for you who gets pulled into things and who doesn't. And that's based here on this chart. You all know this, based on lower and higher vibratory energies, like downward spiraling energies of our ego, and the upward spiraling energies of our true self within ourselves. We all have all these different states in ourselves. But accountability means understanding, first of all, where is my energy right now? Like, where is it at? Where does it get pulled into? And what is my alignment? Where do I want to be? Okay, and that's what we're talking about when we talk about accountability. If I can, like say my alignment, and this is probably true for most of all here within this community, our alignment is, we all see ourselves as energetically sensitive, as empathic, and we try to stay in our heart, and we try to be in a place of love and abundance and expression of our highest potential, okay? Also, of course, in conjunction with healing and self-healing. So this is here pretty much all our alignment. And of course, we wouldn't say no if life was just all a matter of joy. So this is where we want to be, okay? And this is where many of us find our energy at for quite a lot of it of time, like say, throughout our lives. Then this, of course, is hard to reconcile from a mental perspective. Spiritually, that's even more complex, because spiritually, what we, of course, want is to be in a place of givingness, of abundance, of unconditionality, and yet we find ourselves in a constant place of sort of having to cope with things, and having to justify things, having to defend things, having to, feeling judged or judging others. And one of the ways to spiritually reconcile that is to create a religion that allows you to do this, to make a religion that makes that sort of the whole purpose of the religion. And that's why you find so many religions, like organized spiritual groups, who actually propagate, righteousness, who propagate victimhood, who propagate, an eye for an eye. Okay, so I'm not here, of course, to criticize any other organizations or institutions, but I want you to pay attention to this. Pay attention to all these institutions, organizations, and groups that propagate those type of perceptions and those type of coping mechanisms, because those are the ones that keep you stuck in these places. And here, I don't know if you can read this on your screen, but you have, like the threshold of truth here, this division line between lower and higher vibratory resonances within us. It's also linked to our karma, and karma as in like sort of fate, as in like what we're fated to do. And when we are caught in these coping mechanisms of our ego, which is pretty much linked to the animalistic part of our brain, to our autonomous nervous system, to our very basic sort of functions in the 3D, it also binds us to collective karma. It binds us to the perspective of the majority of people. And this wasn't a problem if we were bound to the collective karma, if the majority of the collective is still caught in ego. Maybe in 100 years from now, the collective, as in like the majority of people on this planet, actually have this alignment of love and healing and abundance. Then, of course, the collective karma of us humans shifts. But this is something the majority of people on this planet cannot see yet. They cannot see that by attaching themselves to their egos, that they're keeping the collective development, the collective evolution in sort of this experience of misery and suffering. And that's why a lot of spiritual concepts are formed around that, formed around suffering. Now, what is happening right now, and you've heard me talk about this many times, is that a lot of us are starting to kind of jump out of this. And I guess what's called global awakening, or whatever you want to call this, I don't feel comfortable with any of these words, ascension or global awakening or anything, but I don't have a better word for it either. What happens here with us is that we are beginning to see things from a different perspective. And we're beginning to see, and this is particularly the case here in these transitional states 6, 7, and 8, where we begin to understand things, where we begin to see the puzzle pieces, where we may not be able to fully get it all. I doubt that, like Justine said, that we're probably never ever going to be able to do this. But we have sort of a deeper understanding of things here. And this is really when we become able to work on our responsibility, to work on that accountability that Brian mentioned in the beginning. We cannot really work on this when we're caught in our ego. In fact, it's actually the very definition of ego that it is bound to the collective energies going on around it. And so anyone who feels at the direct sort of effect of collective energies and gets stuck there, it's a sign that you need to work on your ability to center your energies and shift your energies more, so that you can arrive at least here at a place of like where you begin to see this and where you begin to become able to detach from it. So detachment is sort of the big theme here for September. The courage to own our own energy, the ability to let go of our fears, judgments, our need to control and fix things, and really embracing this empowerment that comes through that, which then allows us to shift things in our life. It allows us to shift out of our pain, out of our fear, out of our anger, and even out of our specialness or the control and judgment that is tied to that. And these next 2 weeks in September, they're going to be sort of circling mostly in the realm of our relationships. All right, so it's all, the energies want to go into harmony, and in order to go into harmony, you kind of have to you're forced to deal with your environment. Okay, I have a lot of people who say, yeah, I don't have a problem with my environment, but yeah, that's because you live isolated somewhere and you have no kids and you have no, job that forces you to go out, and you have relatively little exposure. Not that I say that you need all that in order to grow, but it definitely expedites things. Anyone here who has children will probably agree with me that having children is a huge test, and it really sort of challenges our ability to stay centered and to let go in love. All right. So if we don't really interact with our environment, then we are not really learning either. This is in some cases, this can be a form of escape. We got to be aware of that. All right. So these next 2 weeks will force us to interact with our environment. And when I say relationships, of course, I'm not just talking about love relationships. I'm talking about all kinds of relationships. And for some of you, it may mean that you're going to be faced or maybe confronted with resolving relationship issues that have been looming, maybe with your siblings or with friends, or your parents, or whatever, or even with your bosses or whatever. And when I say resolve or reconcile, I don't necessarily mean that you have to go into peace. You have to resolve it. You have to let it go. So letting go, not as in dissociating, but letting go as in detaching from whatever it is with that relationship, or with the resistance that you have with a person or an environment. Overcoming your resistances and your limitations. As for myself, for instance, just to give you an example here, how I'm taking that, I have been having a resistance with neighborhood all my life. I kind of want to be left alone. Some of that has to do, of course, with the nature of what I work and so forth. But some of it is just a coping mechanism, because I grew up in big cities and so forth, and I kind of learned to isolate my energy real quickly from other people, living above and next to me and underneath me, growing up in an apartment building. So I have a resistance with really interacting sort of on a heart level with my neighbors. And I put that on my to-do list here for the end of, or the second half of September, to actually build relationships with my neighbors, because I recognize the necessity, to open up a little more and to. I don't mean necessarily to be social. Being social can mean different things for people. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being more open, being more sort of in that calm place with it, not having to resist, not being judgmental, and so forth. Another thing that is that we're looking at right now is really on a global level is the deception. All right, so these last weeks in September, they have a lot to do with everything that we went through from say April till August. All right, like the everything that came forward here in these last 6 months. And if you look at it, most of it had to do with truth, news, media, fake news, all that, identity theft, like data theft. A lot of that kind of stuff is now really coming to the surface. So the things that we've experienced here the last week, with the one of the U.S.'s largest credit rating institution being hacked, with data theft on various levels, all right, is really going to hit us into the face now. There are much bigger consequences to that than we think they are. And this is coming more and more into the foreground now. And anyone who thought that they had privacy or the ability to control their own data, I think that last sort of piece of hope is going to be gone. All right. So all these things in regards to like how our lives are really being controlled and manipulated from the outside, those things will really sort of hit us in the face right now. And that's why there's a connection with the financial sector and why this kind of has to lead as a natural consequence. This is not a threat or a punishment. It's a natural consequence because most of our financial system is based on that lie. All right, so these things, so we have to kind of brace ourselves for more, you know, even though it seems impossible, truth coming forward. And all that, you know, something similar that from what we happened or what we experienced in the early 2000s and 2008, like the housing bubble, stuff like that. Those kind of things are going to happen now in the next 2-3 weeks. And how this is all sort of directed, how there's like a really intricate role play, like a masquerade going on politically, financially, economically, and so forth. So these are the things now that are coming to us. So if you have a hard time accepting things the way they are, all right, then this will be a difficult process for you. If you are willing to accept those realities, as they, you know, have probably already been prompted within you, all right, then you don't need to be afraid. You can look at them and can say, okay, you know, I guess, you know, either way, whichever way it works out is fine with me as long as I am standing in my self-responsibility. And I really want to give you guys a few practical tips here for, about preparedness before I let you go. And I want you to ask questions. It's really important. I've been talking to people all week about this. What can I do to prepare myself? Well, what can I do? You say accepting reality. So what do you recommend me to, how can I accept reality? What kind of questions come up for you when you hear this?
Well, I know financial concerns come up as far as if the banks go bust and, you know, Wall Street in the United States blows up and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you start asking yourself basic questions like, well, what about my financial interests?
Okay.
What about survival? I mean,
all right, well, let's talk about finances. You know, like obviously there's a difference between someone who has a lot of money and someone who doesn't have a lot of money. So if someone has a lot of money, they may feel sort of a safety, you know, through, you know, like say the assets or whatever they have, and they may not feel like they have to do anything. Someone who doesn't have a lot of money feels, of course, a bit more threatened by this because if like, say, just as a scenario here, the ATM machines don't work for 3 days, what am I going to eat? All right. Where do you guys feel, where do you find yourselves? What is your main concern? Long-term finances or short-term, I mean, survival-related issues? I mean, Brian, you and I talked about this a bit before in regards to long-term
right.
things. But you know, like as far as like how can you hedge I'm just talking here. I'm waiting for you guys to raise your hand to both. Okay, but yeah, most of them say both long and long term and short term. We talked about long term things like, okay, what do I do with my investments? Say I've worked all my life and to pay into my pension plan, my 401k, as they call it here in the United States. They call it differently in different countries. We have people here from all over the world. Just to mention that. Quite a few Australians today. Hello, Australia. I don't know what you call it in Australia, but like say you've worked all your life and you've paid into like sort of a government sponsored or regulated or corporation a regulated pension fund. You guys will be the ones hit the hardest and the first. Anything that is sort of pooled in funds that have been managed by institutions are subject to speculation, meaning that they're being sold and resold on multiple levels within the financial system, and they are the things that first crash. And we have been seeing this for a while. We've been seeing this, of course, going on for like, say, almost like the last 10 years, but now it's getting like one after another, like regulations coming into play, making it much harder for us to be recompensated if, like, say, our pension fund goes down. And I'm not even talking about the pension fund going down through miscalculation or misinvestment. I'm talking about your pension funds just completely being scratched, like they don't exist, because that money is not there. It has been used to speculate in areas that you don't even want to know, and that money does not exist anymore. And so if you want a tip here as far as like, yes, and this is where your fear kicks in, yes, and it should. And everything that we talked about earlier here in regards to self-responsibility, it counts for our finances, for long-term finances as well. If we completely externalize our financial future to a government-run or corporation-run fund, like a piece of paper, like a number on a piece of paper, you are not safe. There's a lot of marketing money that has been flowing into like making you feel safe about it, but it's literally a Ponzi scheme. It's literally a pyramid system that is now coming to an end, that is now falling apart, which means you don't need to panic or anything, but it means that you have to take responsibility for parts of this. And I don't know about Canada, Cheryl. I'm reading, responding to some of the comments here. Here in the United States, you can take ownership of your pension fund. You can have this being paid out. You can even manage it yourself, all right, with a few cuts, because you know, depending on the tax system that you're in. But you can take ownership of that. And if you're asking me, if you're a person who has a lot of, or anyone who has sort of their financial future externalized in a government or a corporation-run fund, I recommend strongly to take over self-responsibility control. Now, then, of course, you have to answer the question, what are you going to do next? You know, like, where are you going to put this? Well, and and here's another question. What does that mean, like withdrawing all the money from the cash from the bank? Now, if you have cash on your bank, that's a little different because you can act quicker. All right, if you have your financial future tied up in pension funds, it takes usually a couple of weeks to liquidate this. And so I would recommend to not liquidate, but to at least get it out of there and take responsibility for it. When you have money liquidated out of your funds and you have that on your bank account, then you have a few more options. At least now you have the option to go to the bank in the morning, you know, when you feel like you should, and get the money. Right? That's a step up from having, you know, from trusting in the government or trusting a corporation to take care of that for you. All right. It still is an issue when the financial system collapses, because what we most likely then will experience is something like, and this is actually already going on. This has started this at the beginning of the year, and I don't know if you guys can feel this in other countries as much as we do here in the United States, but there's something like a hyperinflation going on, meaning that the money is actually losing its value much, much faster than you are getting that back from the bank. So right now, keeping your money in the bank really isn't an option, not even for midterm investment, because there is no investment. You're losing money if you keep your money in the bank. It's safer to actually keep it underneath your mattress. However, what if the currency itself falls apart, such as the euro or some other European currencies, or the US dollar for that matter? Then of course, you know, all the bucket loads of money that you have on, you know, in your house, they're not going to really help you anymore. In those cases, it's always smarter to invest in things that have intrinsic value, such as, you know, like a house that you know, if you haven't sort of paid an over inflated price for it, or precious metals, for instance. That's something that you know, we have used to hedge sort of currency issues for hundreds of years. You know, to go into gold, to go into silver, and up until now, these precious metals have been manipulated, these markets, for those things. So you're not really making an investment there, but you could be at least safe. You know, no matter what the currency is, if you have larger amounts of money in gold, you're not going to lose anything. Okay, you're not necessarily going to gain anything, because at least up until now, these markets have been regulated too much. This could change by the beginning of next year. I'm seeing that change. But even then, you know, using precious metals, or especially gold, for paying, you know, for your bread and your cheese may not be practical. You know, gold's become so expensive that it's not really a feasible way of you know, going about, you know, unless you want to buy like really large valuable items. So silver will probably be the better sort of way of getting by. All right, so silver at this very moment is very, very cheap, and even if you just invest a little bit in silver to hedge inflation, you'll probably be making a good deal with that. Guys, it's a lot easier if you speak into your microphone. I can't read that much and talk. If you just if you have a question, please just say it. It's easier for me because we're running out of time already. Yes, I understand that when, you know, you may be seeing things that way and your partner doesn't, or there's issues with some, you know, family money and so forth, how to organize that. My recommendation is, okay, if you haven't managed really to be in a place of financial independence, and this hits a lot of women really here in the States and Europe as well, and I don't know how that is in Australia, but here it's very common that sort of the man is the head of the household. Yeah, and these, you know, we have to work towards independence there as well within the family, meaning that You know, if you disagree with these things in regards to long-term investments, well, then the best tip I can give to you is like, well, then build your own financial securities. Even if you do a small job on the side or whatever, and make sure that you have your own things that you invest in. I have been recommending people to get a silver coin or a gold coin once a week or once a month for the last 15 years.
Hello.
You can do that. Yes, hello.
It's Cheryl.
Hey, Cheryl.
So I've been working on this plan for probably 25 years. My old teacher said, buy gold, buy silver. So I've been doing that. And I just bought a bunch. Again, please don't rob my house. No, I just bought a bunch 2 weeks ago, too, because I tried the crypto thing, as you know, Jona, because you were trying to help me figure out how to maneuver around that. But it just made my fear stronger because I just felt I was being left behind and I'm too late and I'm not smart enough. And I just had to walk away, and I haven't tried it since. And I've always been a big fan of having cash on board. And then I sold my house last year and I got all this cash, like not in my house, but it's in the bank. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm waiting for, because it's really not practical to buy hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of silver coins and figure out what the hell you're going to do with it. So
thank you,
it's
Cheryl.
quite a, well, and the other thing is my husband just retired after 38 years, and he's getting a pension, and he is not of this world. Like we don't think the same at all, because he's looking at me when all this silver is coming into the house, and he's like, anyway. I'll let you respond to that, and maybe it'll give some of the other folks a couple things to
Well, we have been
about.
conditioned. We have been conditioned, and so have our parents and the previous generations, to externalize our financial powers. Don't forget that. I mean, to pay into a pension fund that we don't even have control over, to put our money into banks where we don't even have control over, like, say, interest rates and so forth, especially here in the United States, is part of a deception plan, all right? I mean, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist for that. We have been conditioned to externalize our financial powers. And this is also why this sort of prediction here, not my prediction, but this financial prediction is steering so many people into anxiety, into fear, because if you can't believe in the dollar, if you can't believe in your government taking care of you, well, what can you believe in? Because that's really sort of what it comes down to. The whole point of ownership of your own energy, your own reality, is that you know what you can control and what you can't control. And there are some things that we can't control. So those things, ditch all those. Everything that you cannot control, like an earthquake or a hurricane, just don't even think about it. Unless it hits your area and you can see it coming for 3 days, and do something, okay? Like go somewhere or whatever. But the things that you can control, you need to take ownership of. And this goes directly with what we talked about earlier, this conditioning of externalizing our energies. We have been conditioned collectively to externalize our powers. And that's why it's so difficult for some people to accept this reality. That, that there is manipulation, that there is deception, and that there is a non-integrous sort of stuff going on with our money, with our resources, and with our energies. But it doesn't mean that you have to fight against things and go out and go against the system. No, all you really got to do is go into owning your own energy, owning your own source of power, own your own resources. And if you have more money than you could ever, like, say, consume, then invest in things that support self-sustainability, that support infrastructure, that support, other people are doing something. If you are not doing anything on your own, you know, because you're retired, or because you know, you've already done your share, or because you can't, or whatever, then invest in things that are doing that. So when it comes to these big sums of money, Cheryl, that you're dealing with, all right, the only thing you can do with this, beyond the things that you could consume, all right, is to invest in others, to really invest in things that create sort of a self-propelled, upward spiraling energy by itself.
The interesting part about this, Yona, is as I'd mentioned, that this is where my fear button is, right? And as I work to clear out all the junk within myself and get settled with it, and for everything else in my life, when the prompting comes, like a couple weeks ago, it said buy a bunch of silver. I bought a bunch of silver, and then I wait, and I wait for the prompting, because when I get mental about, oh, what am I supposed to do now, the fear comes up, and then I can't hear anything, or I can't feel anything anyway. So I know what I'm doing, and I'm sitting and I'm waiting, but the answer isn't coming, and I can just hear something going tick tock, tick tock, tick tock in the back, and I'm like, oh my God! Like
So the thing is,
it's such a
the thing with money, Cheryl, is the same with our energy. It's always the same. We've talked about the same thing here from the beginning. You got to shift it. Okay, most people are afraid of losing money. They have this fear of loss. Remember, I talked about that in the beginning. The ego kicks in and constricts, and immediately, you know, you go into, you know, all kinds of defensive mechanisms internally. All right. So the ideas to how to deal with money in future is the same as with your energy. You have to learn how to shift things. When I talk about investing into like businesses, organizations, or items that that promote self-sustainability, that promote infrastructure and so forth, you could also invest into items. You know, you don't have to invest into another person's business. But you have to feel out the energy. Is that a self-propelled energy, or is that something that depends on you know, structures that are possibly falling apart, that are based on ego? So you have to find those places, people, businesses, items, ideas that are based on the higher vibratory levels. You know, the blue zone here. Because these are the ones that are independent of the red stuff, on a personal level as well as on a collective level. So if you visit, like for today, this morning I visited an urban farm here in Denver, and I saw what they were doing there, and it's amazing what they do there. They've created a whole community there of kids and motivated people who grow community fruits and vegetables. They will take care of animals, and you know, these things are sort of hobby things for most people. But if you really think all the way down to crisis, to hands-on crisis, right? Then these are going to be the places where people will want to invest in. Because they create infrastructure, they create community, they create sustainability. It depends on where you're from, you know, as far as your profession and so forth is concerned, what you can see here as far as like understanding businesses. Like myself, I've, as you guys know, and there's a bunch of questions here from you guys all around the same subject, cryptocurrencies. I come from the software industry originally, and so I can of course see a lot of potential right now in new software companies emerging, and they have a lot to do with cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies right now, and I've said this a few times, and I'm actually preparing for an interview with a cryptocurrency expert for our Sacred Self-Healing community here. We have, the next meeting that we have is planned for the 30th, and I may replace that with a cryptocurrency special for all of you guys. But the cryptocurrency market is extremely volatile right now. And just so you guys know, we had something really big happening this week, where the crypto market crashed like about 40% in some areas, and recovered since yesterday morning almost just as fast. It's not entirely recovered, but it's going there. You got to understand that when I say Wild West, and when I talk about volatility, this is what you're looking at right now. So I would not recommend you guys to invest into cryptocurrencies too much as security. But what I can see there is that there's a lot of really, really cool companies coming forward, startups, international startups, that are very much involved in creating a new infrastructure and self-sustaining ecosystems for the future here. I can see this because I come from the software market. So unless you do a lot of research right now, you probably won't be able to easily identify them. But there are alternatives, or there are things that are now starting to pop up, and I'll actually recommend something like that to some of you, because it's still technologically difficult with cryptos. I have just been mentioning them, but not really steering you guys into that, because it's really too difficult for the normal person right now to handle all of that information. But there are things like investment clubs now popping up, where you don't have to deal with the techno part of it, but you do have your secure investment there. Those are things that are beneficial, because you are not really it's like any other investment club. The risk is kind of like spread out a little more, and you have the ability to go in and go out at any time. That gives you a bit more control. Those are things that we will discuss in that crypto special that I'm going to do for the Sacred Self-Healing community. Now, here's, and this is, like the other end of the problem for those who don't have a lot of money, and to whom everything that we discussed here seems like a nice problem to have. What about those of us who just live from one paycheck to another, that live, from those few scraps or whatever that we can get from a government or a pension or whatever? The same really rules apply. You have to look at your situation in regards to your energy, really. Am I investing my energies in the right things? If you work for a company, say, that is based on stealing money, or based on sort of ripping off people, or that is sort of supporting here the red zone, okay? These companies are going to get hit the hardest, because they're not able to sustain. They're not able to survive on the long run. So if you're concerned about, your job, then find a company that you feel more integrous. Products that are more integrous. Products or business concepts that serve others rather than ripping them off. And if you live, with even less than a paycheck, all right, then even more so, go into self-sustainability. What is holding you back from growing your own food? Growing your own food is based on abundance. The sun is always there, and water is always there. Okay, all you need is a handful of seeds and your energy to grow food. But if you're concerned, whether it's justified or not, that you're not going to have anything to eat, in a case of a crisis, then grow your own food. The whole idea here of September energies, whether it's in regards to our relationships, to our finances, to our survival, is that you go into the place of self-responsibility, accountability for what you do and what you choose, and that you learn how to shift your energy, which includes your thoughts, your deeds, your sentiments, your physical expressions, in a balanced and a calm state, because in a calm state is where you can make better choices for the future. If you go into fear, your choices are going to be limited to whatever options you can see on this frequency level. And as you can see here, in fear, all you can see is as culpability, so to speak, is running away, going into victimhood, or going into fear. Perhaps maybe if you have a little more energy, going into attack. These options will all create low vibratory choices and outcomes in your life. So you have to learn how to shift your energy into this empowered state where you're willing to see things the way they are. And if you notice that you're not there, then put your effort into that. How can I get there? Instead of trying to think about all what ifs or worrying about your money, go into this empowered state of being willing to deal with things as they arise. And then the ability to make a good choice is, your chances of making good choices has multiplied. Okay, so people who don't have a lot of money, they need to learn how to take more responsibility for their lives in the smaller ways. Because if you don't have any food for your family for tomorrow, it's very difficult to be in an empowered place. You have to work on everything in your life that you get into this empowered place, at least that you can stand your ground. And Tracy is recommending here, or actually sharing, that step 18 here from our Sacred Self-Healing program has been really helpful the last few weeks in helping to shift out of levels 3, 4, and 5. Yes. Step 18 is aligned to letting go. And that's why, that's how we should see the steps to help us to align to certain resonances so that our energy can arrive there. And when our energy arrives there, then our thoughts, our emotions, our choices, the way we contextualize things, all these different aspects, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic, they become more visible for us, and we can make better choices. This is September, guys. It forces us to do that. And everything that we are willing or able to sort out now will actually have quite a big effect on our future. Right now, as Eloise commented here in the beginning of the webinar, it seems like timelines are crossing now with multiple outcomes available and up for grabs. And that's correct. This is what I talked about in the energy update, not this week, but last week. Convergence. There are a lot of things converging right now here towards the end of September, which means that even if you don't fully understand these concepts of retrocausality and timelessness and so forth, it doesn't really matter. Those are just sort of our feeble attempts to explain this scientifically. But really, what is going on is that it's one of those situations in life, in the development of circumstances where there is big outcomes possible or likely. These times, such as like say every century kind of has these couple of years where there's a lot of different stuff happening at once. Last century, it was the late 20s, early 30s, you know, which determined pretty much the next 100 years. It was the rise of the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States. It was the rise of Adolf Hitler in Germany, determining, you know, you all know what that determined, and so forth. So there was a time in the last century where a lot of things happened that really, really shifted the way things developed here on the planet. And we are once more in this time period right now. And September is sort of the foreboding month for that. The month where all of this is sort of existing at the same time as potentiality, and whichever sort of frequency, if you will, with that, whichever energy you are aligning yourself to right now is what's going to determine the outcome for you for, you know, at least the next 10 years. And the energy of that is like 3-4 years. So 3-4 years is the direct consequence of your choices right now. 10 years is sort of the larger effect of that. There is a new cycle starting energetically in roughly 20 years from now. But as for our immediate sort of future, this is where it's happening, guys, right now. Okay, so this is where those of us who have this awakening or this prompting, where we have to pay a lot of attention. Excuse me. It's our everyday thoughts, our everyday alignments, our everyday emotions and actions that count now. Okay. Unless there's any burning questions left, we need to come to an end here. I thank you all for your patience. Sorry. Drink a sip of water here. The next Sacred Self-Healing meeting, we're going to skip next week. As you all know, we have the workshop going on here in Colorado, starting on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Those will be this very interesting 72 hours, kind of like a marathon in the physical. And so next Saturday we're going to skip simply due to exhaustion, most likely. But the Saturday after, which is the 30th, we actually have a workshop announced for all of you. The workshops are a little different from our meetings. Meetings are more sort of discussions or step work. In our workshops, we're actually working through something together. And the theme for that meeting is going to be speaking from the heart. So we're going to be introducing a few techniques to you in the practical, like how you can align yourself to speaking, to expressing what you're truly feeling in your heart. And that will be on the 30th at 1 p.m. here, Denver time. Unless, and I will announce this if this happens in a couple of days, we do the cryptocurrency special. I may put the cryptocurrency special on a different day of the week so that we don't have to skip the workshop or move that one. But this is the subject of our next meeting, and all of you who will be coming to Colorado here this week, they will have a lot of different trainings and actually group exercises and so forth. So a lot of cool subjects to talk about. And those of you who can't be here, don't worry. We're going to have recordings just like we have recordings here for our meetings, and you're going to get some of that. Not all of it, but some of that within here, the Sacred Self-Healing community later. All right. So I wish you guys a very successful and smooth second part of September here. Our next current energies meeting is, I don't know, the middle of October. So in like 4 weeks from now, talking about October energies. And I'm pretty sure that our discussion then is going to be much different from it was today. Okay? All right, everyone. You have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Thank you so much for coming and for contributing. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.